Hey, welcome back to the Phoenix Mercury podcast. I am your host who is very excited to talk to you. That's why I just lost wind already. And I am joined by my co-host, Stephen Fridgen Gardner. Stephen, how you doing today? How was your weekend?
I'm blessed. My weekend was amazing. The weather here in Chicago is turning multiple corners, and it's too hot. So that we're in a little situation right now, but we
I
working
know
with
you ain't complaining to me
it.
about the heat, right?
Oh no! Please don't take that as me complaining. I promise you I'm not, because it could definitely be snowing right now. So I'm just taking what we got for sure.
Yeah, it was a little bit toasty here this weekend when I was walking into the Footprint Center on Saturday. I'm like, how do I dress for this? Because I'm always cold in an arena. It does not matter. And then it's freezing outside, or it's hotter than nuts outside. So I'm like, what am I doing? I'm
I feel
sorry,
like
Saul. My name is Erica L. Day.
it should be cold everywhere inside out there. So that sounds like how it should be, by my opinion.
It's horrible. I know the girls that just got, signed here are like, what did we sign up for? Like, Kahleah Copper's got to be melting. And she's like, can I go back to Chicago now? Because this is ridiculous.
I remember her and Natasha. Like, one of the first things they mentioned was the heat. On Twitter or elsewhere, they were talking about how hot it is. So that's funny, but it's also very much not surprising at all either.
Yeah, it was definitely toasty this weekend, but I'm pretty freaking excited to be talking to you guys today. We had a pretty good weekend as Mercury fans, and so I just am pretty pumped to get into a the recap of the Mercury's game versus the Atlanta Dream on Saturday, the home opener, and of course, our beloved head coach Nate Tibbetts' first win as a WNBA head coach. Stephen, what were some of your immediate takeaways from this win?
First, definitely want to congratulate Coach Tibbetts about the first official win, and just generally seeing how, I think the big thing to me. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to talk about on the court, but it was the interactions from the sideline. And I mean, there's a couple of examples of it, but there's one that comes to mind vividly for me, where I think it was maybe the third quarter, or no, it was in the first half. It was maybe the second quarter. Natasha Cloud drove to the basket, got fouled, and she ended up sliding almost near the sideline. And usually you see the teammates on the latter end of the bench jumping up to help a player up after they fall or whatever the case was. Rarely do you see the head coach get over there and get involved with that. They usually are a little bit more to themselves during the game rather than getting involved with the team's vibes type of stuff. He was the first person to get to Natasha Cloud, like sprinting over from the coach's box to meet her in the deep corner near their sideline and helping her up, and then everybody else kind of followed from there. And I mean, it's just definitely not the body language police, and I'm not somebody that's into all of that, but it's not hard to tell when the vibes are immaculate and that when everybody's moving on the same accord and there's the buy-in factor and people trust each other. It's really not hard to see those things, and inversely, it's also not hard to see when things are out of whack. So again, to see that so soon, and this team's been together for still not even a full month yet, that says a lot about where they are and where they're headed. And again, Brittany Griner's still not even back yet, so that's just only going to add to everything that they've established so far.
I think above all else, like you said, the vibes on Saturday were really good. You can tell everyone's bought in to coach. I think after the or in the post-game presser, they talked a lot about how he is a true player's coach. I mean, he really is. He puts them first. Kahleah Copper had an air ball and a biff layup in this game. It was definitely humorous considering the fact that the girl had almost 40 points. But you can see them laughing and giggling on the sidelines about it. And you can tell how, for lack of a better term, unserious they are with each other and how serious it makes them on the court. It has transpired and translated so well for this team. And it's just been so fun to watch unfold.
Yeah. And I think those examples you're talking about, and then I think Natasha and Kahleah actually spoke about it in post game. How Nate was basically getting on Kahleah in a joking manner mid game, while they're at a while it's crunch time. And he's telling her like, yeah, you might have had 40 if you didn't smoke that layup. Like it's little things like that are indicators of the frequency everybody's vibing at, but also at the same time, those things are extremely important to any team dynamic because things can get very mundane when it's work and it's work and it's always work and it's always work. The less those things actually feel like work and the more they're actually like truly enjoyed, to where you're looking forward to going to work because you're enjoying the people that you're spending time with, the thing that you're building towards, and again, just generally letting all of those vibes kind of mesh into one big thing that makes a team a team. That's just really important, especially again to see it so early in the season. You can tell these players like genuinely enjoy seeing each other. How many times did we see players congratulating and embracing Natasha Mack for the multitude of positive things that she did in her second game starting? I think all of those things are just indicators, and it definitely speaks to the culture, like Nate Tibbetts spoke to post game, that he's attempting to establish and that he's clearly laying a foundation for.
Absolutely. I definitely think that, like you said, the Natasha Mack piece is huge because she was obviously not supposed to start for the Mercury this year. She was obviously supposed to come off the bench behind Brittany Griner, and unfortunately, the cookie did not crumble that way for her. And fortunately, she has delivered on in every opportunity that she's been given. I think she's risen to the occasion, and I just think that when you have a player like that that maybe wasn't supposed to have the role she's had and been able to come in and play at the level she has, I think you're just set up for success for when Brittany Griner does return.
Correct. And I think that's something that I was kind of hinting towards when we had the conversation about Brittany's sudden absence going into the regular season. It's like, yes, on one side, you obviously want to have arguably your best player and one of your biggest difference makers. But at the same time, injuries always present opportunity. And that whether that's opportunity figuring out life without said player so that when that player rests, you're not like a chicken with his head cut off trying to figure out how you want to do things. You already have a template for what to do when these different moments of adversity or rest come up over the course of a game. And then the other big thing with the opportunity, not just opportunity to figure out how to operate in life without said player, but also opportunity for another player to step up. And we talked about Natasha, her learning curve is being expedited as far as and as quickly as it possibly can. She got thrown into the fire, like we talked about on the last episode. Like, congratulations, you're starting. Now you got to go guard Asia Wilson. And then in your second game, you got Cheyenne Parker as well as Tina Charles to deal with in the paint. And that's a tall task, literally and figuratively. And she's definitely shown to be up to it. Never getting too high, never getting too low, being where she's supposed to be. And that's something that you can work off of just based off of the general feel that she's shown.
The big shout out I want to give to Natasha Mack is she went at Tina Charles early in this game. She ensured that Tina Charles was in foul trouble and was unable to play at the capacity in which she can play. I assure you, Tina Charles, my brother said it best in the chat, ain't no joke. And she assured that Tina Charles was sat. And I think that that was huge for this team in the first half. I don't think they have the success they have in the first half if Tina Charles gets to play that entire time.
Yeah, for sure. And I got some other things I want to speak to regarding Tina Charles and everything that happened there. And yeah, shout out Laura Day again. Definitely want y'all to hit that thumbs up for us. But I think the other big thing, especially for younger players, they get thrusted into a scenario either that's win now or that's kind of emergency hit the red button like it is at the moment for Natasha Mack. And that's having too much respect for your opponents. Going up against two players that are she's gone up against two players in her first two games that are surefire Hall of Famers. Asia Wilson, the first game, obviously Tina Charles, game two. There's a certain moment where some players have too much reverence for their opponents, to where they're almost playing in a timid manner. And Natasha hasn't shown that at all. And I think that's maybe arguably the most impressive thing. She's just gone about doing her business and doing what she needs to do and just kind of trying to build a boat off of that. And I think that takes a certain level of discipline. It takes a certain headspace that you have to be in. And I think she's moving in the right space that they need her to. And there's going to be tons more growth to come before Brittany comes back.
Absolutely. Yeah, the lack of fear that Natasha Mack is playing with is unmatched by everyone else on the team. Obviously, yeah, The cohesion, I think, has grown a lot. The calmness, you can tell when they walk on the court that the Mercury does not have a big concern about winning or losing. You can feel it. But when it comes to Natasha Mack, above all else, she is fearless walking onto that court, and it doesn't matter whether she's playing the best post in the country, which she gets to do again tomorrow, or she's playing Cheyenne Parker Tyus.
Correct. And I think that speaks to the ecosystem she's existing in, the pillars of leadership that are around her, from her head coach, infusing her with all the confidence and all the trust that she needs to go out and do her job, and to let her know that they believe in her. In addition to literally in real time, Natasha Cloud, I talked about on our very first episode going into this season, her being a master communicator and an over communicator. There's almost not a moment on defense where Natasha is not speaking to somebody. And a lot of the time she's speaking with Natasha Mack just to make sure she understood, okay, your help's here. You can do this. I got your back there. So-and-so is on your other side, so they got help there if you need it. And again, all of those little things, in addition to the multiple embraces of Kahleah Copper, and even more so than anybody else, Diana Taurasi, speaking and just infusing that confidence and that trust in her. She really does feel like she's being upheld by pillars. And you could tell that it's starting to build positive momentum. And they're laying, again, just such a solid foundation for everything that they desire to do. And I think they're in a very good space right now.
I think when you're trying to build the culture that Nate Tibbetts is obviously trying to build here in Phoenix, I think you have to buy in to not only your coach, but also to the other players around you. And I don't think there's a better example in the entire WNBA of being bought into your teammates than here in Phoenix Mercury. I think that they look at each other and they know that they can go to war for each other. I actually am ready to send in a request to add a third Spider-Man to that whole I will run through a wall for you, because Kahleah Copper said it this weekend. So I'm excited to add our third Spider-Man into that. I don't think we need Lexi Brown comments. Chats, I love you guys, but I don't think the Phoenix Mercury need Lexi Brown. Nonetheless, though, the calmness in the huddle, though, was spoken about in the post-game presser between Natasha Cloud and Kahleah Copper, and so I am looking forward to playing for that clip for you guys right now.
Yeah, we came to the huddle like game of runs, like the calmness, the sense of calm that we felt in those moments. I'm like, we about to win this. Like, it was never a moment where we were disconnected. Like, things happened on the court, whether it was a turnover, a foul, a bad foul, whatever. We came to the timeout, we looked at each other, we're like, we got it. Like, it's fine. Like, we're going to be okay. And when we talk about our culture and what we're trying to build and what we want to be, in the toughest moments when you can look to your left and look to your right and notice your teammates is like, let's go, like that's what you want to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you can feel it with Kahleah Copper specifically. You can watch her and Nate Tibbetts interact with each other, and they believe in each other to the fullest capacity. I'm not going to speak to Kahleah's time in Chicago. You can do a much better job of that. But I think Kahleah feels very valued here in Phoenix. She feels very important. She feels like this ownership team is going to do whatever they can to put her in position for success, and it's proven to work well for her so far.
I think you said it perfectly. There's certainly multiple moments where in Kahleah's tenure here in Chicago, she had those kindred spirit type of embraces with previous head coach for the Chicago Sky, James Wade. I think I'm personally, just because I've watched her for so much of her career, like the fact that I'm already seeing those type of embraces with Nate in game 2 in week 3.5 of time they spent together. Things don't usually click that quickly. And so to see it like not have to guess what it is, you can quite literally see, like anybody that you don't have to know anything about basketball, you can see a interaction between two people. You can tell if they're vibing with each other, if they're not, or if there are certain like levels of trust or questions they might have between each other or not. It's very clear there's, like you said, 10 toes down amount of trust between all existing parties, and it's really fireballing and springboarding into something that could be potentially special. Again, all of these things being done without somebody that's going to be another pillar in everything that they want to do on the court and off the court with BG. So I'm just genuinely very impressed with this team on the court and off the court, with the interactions and chemistry and the continuity being built, and then the level of trust that's being felt across the board on all things. it's a very fun time to be a Phoenix Mercury fan or anybody that covers the team. And yeah, like I said, the foundation is just as solid as you could possibly ask for.
All right, let's get into it though. Kahleah Copper, career high, 38 points. Her second best was 37, so she outdid herself by 1 point. And if she hadn't biffed that layup, we would be talking about a 40 piece. So I know you've got a lot to say about Kahleah's performance.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it in the opening episode. We talked about how important her drives and Natasha Cloud's drives would be to the team. I mean, that's the template right there. So for anybody that's new to Kahleah Copper, you can expect these. You might not necessarily expect 38 a game, though she has the potential to do so. And she has that potential not just because of her ability to make shots and finish at the cup and do all of these things, but because she's just a never-ending point of attack for the offense. Anytime she has the ball, there's multiple defenders that are going to be engaged in trying to figure out how to either get the ball out of her hands or take away a driving lane. More often than not, you can't do both, if not either of those two. And we saw that ad nauseum in that game on Saturday night. She was at the basket in the paint almost every single time she touched the ball. And when she didn't, she was pulling up because of the space created from the threat of her drives. And again, that for herself as well as for others is really a fire starter. And now that puts everybody else in a position of where they're either getting a wide open shot or they have the opportunity to catch and pass or catch and attack. And I think those quick decisions coming off of the attention garner from somebody else is the space that Nate Tibbetts is going to want for everybody to be operating in. And I mean, I think the biggest cosign in all of that is the fact that in the fourth quarter, the last 2 minutes and 37 seconds or so, they were down 4. And after that timeout, every play that was ran the rest of the way went through Kahleah Copper. She might not have necessarily initiated the possession, but she initiated the plot of the play where they were trying to get to, whether she was getting downhill to pass to Sophie Cunningham for a 3 or getting to the paint for herself for layups or free throw attempts. And again, the biggest cosign to me is the fact that he went to her instead of Diana Taurasi in that specific moment. I think that says a lot about his trust and belief in her and just the general fire starter that she is. I'm curious, what caught your attention? You were in the arena. You got to see all of that energy up in person. Like, talk to me. What was the energy like?
Well, for starters, y'all, I'm going to maintain that maintaining professionalism in the press row ain't always that easy when Kahleah Copper's scoring 38 points. You know, I was maintaining well until when Kahleah on that final 3 hit by Sophie, when she drove into the paint and you watched her fall on her rear end, which is at the reality what happened. It was just momentum that took her to the ground. But she passed it off to Sophie, and you knew before the ball even got to Sophie Cunningham that ball was going in. It did not matter. It was going in the hoop. And the arena was electric for starters. I think you could feel that this is Kahleah's homecoming. You could feel it in the arena. And that she was here to win. Something we talked about a lot late last week was that you felt that she needed to drive to the rim a lot more. And I feel like she did that in this game. I feel like she created opportunities for herself and her teammates by doing that because it, like you said, it clogged the lane. It clogged defenders as a whole. They had no idea. It almost is like they were listening to our show and they caused chaos because the defenders didn't know what to do.
Yeah, that's what happens when you have a natural fire starter. And Kahleah Copper is that, whether there's a play being ran for her or if she just got the ball in her hands after things break down. And it was just like and Nate spoke to this post game after the game against the Aces, I believe, as well. I asked him about just how important are the drives between Kahleah and Natasha, and he said, yeah, that's something that we have to tap a lot more into. It's quite clear there were conversations had about it, film watched on it, and especially again speaking to some of the positives that come with operating without Brittany Griner. The paint is so open that in the minutes where Brittany's not on the court because of rest and in the rotation, those opportunities to drive, the lane's going to be that much more open. And that's the template, quite literally the template that they're going to need from Kahleah as well as Natasha to match that energy getting downhill to give their offense a little bit of unpredictability, because you never know when one of those two is going to put the ball on the deck to score for themselves. And just the abundance of a threat that is, it just helps to organize the offense so much more. And it gives them an entire different layer outside of running set plays that you can rely on those two. No different than you can rely on throwing the ball to Brittany Griner in the post to go get a bucket.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest takeaway I had from our offense, the Mercury's offense this weekend, was that we saw a completely different team than we saw play the Aces. It was the team that played the Aces was a three-heavy team that wanted to bomb threes. I mean, you could see it. They could have shot 65 threes for all they cared. They wanted to win with threes, which, I mean, it kept them in the game, and it was almost successful for them. I will say that one of my big takeaways from speaking with Nate this weekend is they did not take that as a moral victory. They do not take it as that. And I'm not going to say that that means you step out and see a win from them tomorrow, but I do think, again, you see a very competitive game, a lot more competitive than I think a lot of outsiders are expecting. That being said, though, no moral victories.
Yeah, this
Which I think was
team was
huge
not
for Nate.
constructed, and the money was not spent for this team to be resting on laurels or putting money in the bank on moral victories for sure. You 100% right on that.
Yeah, I mean, Nate opened his pregame press conference with that, with no moral victories. Like, he came out to win, and I think that you're seeing him find his place a little bit in the WNBA as far as knowing how to coach and knowing when the right time. He got, I want to say, his second technical of the season already in the first quarter of the game on Saturday. Which, on one hand, I love a feisty coach. Love it. Love. I want them to fight tooth and nail for every call they think is right. I want them on the floor begging with their hands and knees. But I think that Nate is finding out quickly that the refs in the W are a little bit different than the refs in the NBA, and he's finding his footing with that a little bit. And I think we have to give him a little bit of grace as far as that goes for the rest of these few games.
Yep, I think you are right in that assessment, and I feel like his involvement, it goes a long way. That when if as a player you don't feel like you have to fight for yourself because your coach is doing it from the sideline, and that, again, we're talking about building relationships, building trust, building chemistry, continuity, all of those fun little cliche words that speak to a team that's conducive and in alignment with winning. Those are the type of things that have to be intentionally acted upon at the foundation of everything that you're trying to establish. And I really do feel like he's checking off all of those boxes that you need to, especially, again, for a team that's in win now mode. Like, yes, they're trying to, suss things out in the beginning stages, but at the same time, everything is predicated on them trying to stack as many wins with the chemistry and continuity and all of that. But the wins kind of trump everything else because they're trying to win a championship. Like, this team is not being put together to win just one over the next 4 or 5 years. I think Matt Ishbia has come in and reiterated the fact that he doesn't want to waste any years. Time is very much of the essence, and he's moving as if his job is on the line every season. And he wants for his teams to all have that sense of urgency with everything they're doing as well.
Yeah, I think, when you bring in players like Natasha Cloud and Kahleah Copper that take on the role of making Diana's legacy theirs as well, you completely change the culture of this team. You become a team of maybe you go to the conference finals, maybe. But I think when you put the pride of Diana Taurasi on the backs of Kahleah Copper and Natasha Cloud, that's when we built a championship team within the Mercury.
Yeah, and I think even taking it a step past what you said, which is certainly appropriate and all of that, I think it's the fact that there's a mutual level of respect and reverence that each of these top players has for one another, to where they don't want to move out of whack or out of alignment and potentially sacrifice any percentage of or half a percentage of growth that could be, added to what it is they're trying to establish. They want to do everything the right way. And there's a level of accountability in self as well as the team as a whole that comes with that. And I think the fact that everybody has, like you said, bought into that, understood that at the foundation of everything that they're building, it just speaks to what this team can potentially be and where they are at the moment, which is already ahead of where, in my opinion, I felt like they would be as far as their functionality as a team goes. They're certainly leaps and bounds ahead of where I would have expected for them to be in just game 2 and week 3.5, almost week 4 of their time spent together.
Well, I'm about to call you out.
Talk to me. I already know. Talk to me.
You had the Mercury peg to lose this game.
I did. And it's because of the things that I just spoke to with as far as I'm going up against a team with a dream that's been together for quite some time. They've had the same head coach for a couple of seasons. They also just, got done smacking up the Los Angeles Sparks in the game prior where they dominated the paint. And I talked about the absence of Brittany Griner and the fact that Natasha Mack will have a whole lot on her plate. The Mercury certainly went about their business as far as mitigating as much of that paint presence and the just generally game planning for and executing upon that to take that away as much as they possibly could. And I was thoroughly and genuinely impressed. And I think one of the biggest things that stood out to me almost right away on their first defensive possession, I was curious what the matchups were going to look like with the Mercury going small, especially without Brittany Griner. Who would Natasha Mack be guarding, and who would be guarding the other big between Cheyenne Parker and Tina Charles? So he started off with the matchups. He put Natasha Mack on Cheyenne Parker, and you know who he had on Tina Charles?
Natasha Cloud.
Correct. His starting point guard. He put her on Tina Charles. And talk about setting the tone. You talk about trust. You talk about defensive schemes. To go to that type of cross matching where you're putting your starting point guard on the opposing team starting center, and you're living with the results that come with that. They weren't necessarily sending double teams that early in the game. That was like a riddle or a Rubik's Cube for the Atlanta Dream to try to solve, because any pick and roll with Tina Charles being one of the main screeners for their team to get their guards going downhill and just generally free them turned into a switch. And that switch was going from, if it was Ryan Howard, that screen being set, and that was the switch between Rebecca Allen and Natasha Cloud. There's no advantage being created from that. And you could say the same thing when it was Kahleah Copper involved, who was guarding Alicia Gray. It's like little things like that, and the trustworthiness and the level of execution within that scheme, in addition to Natasha Cloud just being a capital D dog and just being a straight up, arguably the toughest player on the court, taking on that matchup and being able to front the post and really fluster and break up the rhythm of Tina Charles to the extent at which she did in that first half, and really generally for the game, special. And again, when you're building your boat out defensively, you're able to do all of these things so early. It just says a lot. It was a hell of a game from Natasha Cloud on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, offensively, this wasn't Natasha Cloud's best game. And even the box score, if you look at it, it's not that impressive. If you didn't watch the game, you aren't impressed by Natasha Cloud's performance, which, needless to say, is inaccurate. You should be impressed. She is playing her second true game as a true point guard with a team that has nothing but scorers on the floor, basically, right now. I mean, I'm not trying to say that she has the hardest job in the world, but it's not easy, okay? So, I mean, she walked away with, let's see, 5 assists and only 1 turnover this game, which is a great improvement over the Las Vegas game. I want to say she had 5 turnovers against Las Vegas, maybe 4. But, I mean, a grand improvement as far as assist to turnover ratio from the Las Vegas outing.
Yep, and that's why I felt like Natasha being added to this particular group was so important, because she's you can take the position title away. She's just a basketball player that, first of all, wants to win. Nobody wants to win more than her. People might be on par with her. She has a couple of teammates that are certainly on par with her, but nobody wants to win more than her. And to that same extent, nobody's willing to sacrifice more than she is. You know, you talked about her being cross-matched and guarding Tina Charles. That's not something that every point guard is going to say, no, I want to do this, and you're going to actually believe them when they say that.
Yeah, sorry, Diana Taurasi is not doing that. Let's keep one thing a buck here, and Diana Taurasi is not doing that.
But by the same token, Diana's also not being paid to do that. So you already know how DT is. That would be her rebuttal. Nah, my role is to get buckets. All of that defense stuff, y'all do that. I'll be there when you need me to, but my role is to get a bucket and get a whole lot of them. And I promise you, I'm gonna do that. Everybody else do their job. I'll do mine, and we'll rock out. But
Diana was she was boxing out this weekend. I want to give her the shout out she deserves for the box out. Okay.
That speaks to buy-in, because she believes in everything that Nate is preaching and his coaching staff is preaching and film sessions and game planning. But kind of bringing it back to Natasha, again, that's not something that every point guard is going to willingly accept. It might happen over the course of a game with switches, but to go to that from the onset, that just speaks to, what she wants to do. There's not going to be a lot of point guards that are all-star caliber, potential all-NBA, all-WNBA caliber, that are going to be willing to take only a couple shots or that can have an impact on the game past just scoring and passing the basketball. Natasha is, like I said, a basketball player, whether it's diving on the floor for loose balls, taking charges, putting her body on the line. Obviously, scoring is, getting assists comes with that because of the position she plays. But just generally speaking, you can't tab one specific box score metric to her and assess her game from that, because her leadership is something that will never show up. The abundance of communication that she gives to the team on the defensive side of the ball will never show up on the box score, but it's something that's as functional as her setting up shop for the offense for DT to get a pass off of a wide screen to get a pull-up, or for Kahleah Copper to get a backdoor cut, or BG to get a paint touch. That communication on that back end and the things that she does from a off-the-court perspective in terms of intangibles are invaluable to this team, and I think you're already seeing the benefits being reaped from that.
We got a question from Mick G. Blue. Should we be worried about Natasha's foul count throughout the season? I think she was thrown into a very unique situation against the Dream, where she was having to guard a post, and I think maybe she put herself in a little bit of a few sticky situations in terms of fouls on Saturday. So I don't think so, but it seems as though Steven might.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. That's not something that I would worry about in any capacity, but I do feel like it's something to keep an eye on because, again, everything that they desire to do, they need Natasha to be on the floor, especially in those meaningful moments. And it can't be that she's not available because of foul adversity. That's something that she just has to be better at. She will be better at. It's not something that she struggled with on consistency. And yeah, it's definitely something, a good eye on that to see early in the season. But I also think it's something that can be attributed to, like you talked about, the dynamic of her guarding a post for a good majority of that game against the Dream, and just generally the rust that comes with the early part of the regular season. I think by the end of the first quarter of the regular season, that won't be an issue, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
I will say also the physicality on Saturday was next level. Not that we're not going to see anything crazy like that throughout the rest of the season, but the Atlanta Dream brought some serious physicality on Saturday, and obviously that helped contribute to the foul counts as well.
Yep, and that also speaks to how games are going to be officiated on an individual per game basis. Every game is not going to be friendly to the physicality levels in the regular season that we saw in that game on Saturday. By the same measure, it might be a group of refs that might allow for a game to be even potentially a little bit more handsy, obviously in a basketball sense, for it to be a little bit more physical, let them bang a little bit more in the paint in particular. And again, I think Tanisha Wright, head coach of the Atlanta Dream, helped with that as far as the physicality. I'm sure that's definitely a way that they got back in the game over the course of the middle quarters, just kind of imposing their will a little bit more. And just looking across at the Mercury at the moment without Brittany Griner, like, hey, you all don't have anybody that's taller than 6'3", and you also don't have anybody that's more physically imposing than our two posts, in addition to anybody else in our front court that we're bringing off the bench. So that's something that allowed for them to, that's an advantage for them, and they were playing to that. So I think it's something that, like, a little bit of chess and gamesmanship over the course of the game that we saw. The referees definitely could have been a little bit better with the whistles as far as how the game was being officiated. Nonetheless, that's something that's out of the players' control. I think they handled it well. They didn't give too much energy to that and take away from the game. And because they had that wherewithal and that composure to play through that adversity, that's something that's out of their control. You saw them come back in the last minute or 2 minutes and 37 seconds and ultimately win that game.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when the Atlanta Dream started to go on their little run, though, you could definitely tell that the fans were getting a little nervous, but you could tell that the players on the bench weren't nervous. Nate wasn't nervous, and he maintained that composure all game. And when he draws up the plays, I think he believes in his players to go out there and do exactly as he asked them to do. And not that I think that final big three by Sophie was exactly as he drew it up. I think that it was one of two options that he had in his head back ready to go. And Kahleah did exactly as he asked him to do.
Yeah, that is maybe my biggest takeaway outside of the interpersonal dynamics that come with Nate in his first couple games. I have enjoyed his attention to detail in game managing from the sideline and speaking to the biggest moments where a coach is going to have control over a game is going to come directly after timeouts and directly after fouls. And the plays that he's going to in those particular scenarios over the course of games, like that speaks to not just a coach, but that also speaks to a team's ability to execute whatever it is that's drawn up. And in those scenarios, it's been very impressive. He's been able to get extremely high shot quality for insert player here, whether that be Sophie, Rebecca, obviously Kahleah ad nauseum on Saturday, even Natasha, and then obviously even Diana more than anybody else. Everybody's been up to the task of whatever play it is that he's drawn up or he's called for them to go to. And we've seen a level of execution that, again, speaks to me for seeing that this team is a little bit ahead of the curve from where I expected them to be at through 2 games. And I think especially the after timeout plays have really been something that's caught my attention, and it's something I'm gonna be watching for going forward. But I actually kind of talked about on my YouTube channel Kahleah Copper's successes in her career high game on Saturday. And Eric, if you could pull up the screenshot, there's the tweet that I sent. It's a video that's also on YouTube on my YouTube channel. Just kind of looking at a particular action that Nate went to 5 separate times in the final 2 minutes and 37 seconds of that game. And they scored or got a positive result on 4 of those 5 possessions, whether that be Kahleah Copper getting free throws, Kahleah Copper hitting Sophie Cunningham in the opposite corner as Sophie's defender helped off of her to help on the drive from Kahleah, or Kahleah obviously getting up mid-range pull-ups or getting to the basket and scoring for herself. I think it's just subtle moments like that where you really get to see who a coach maybe trusts more as far as what he's trying to dictate over the course of a game. We saw exactly that from him with Kahleah to close that game. And I think that speaks to the general direction that he's going to be wanting to kind of go win things when they need it most, how he's going to go about functionality-wise.
All right, Steven, talk to me. What do we think we're doing tomorrow? What do we think for the Phoenix Mercury's rematch against the Las Vegas Aces tomorrow?
Because of the games coming in such close proximity from one another, literally a week, 7 days between, there's going to be a level of gamesmanship and preparedness that that element of surprise that came in game 1 to start the season is not going to be there in the second game. And I think it's going to make for not necessarily a playoff style feel, but it's going to have a certain feel to it. It's not going to be, hey, this is our first time seeing each other. Like, no, we're familiar with your game, and we're not going to allow you to do this, and you're not going to be allowed to do that. I like the level that the Mercury are heading into this game with the Aces with. Now, actually winning this game is going to take some different types of demands that we saw that they were certainly up to the task of in that first game. They just ultimately didn't have enough of it over the course of 4 entire quarters. And I think therein lies the full challenge. Can you put together 4 full quarters where your offense does not hit that 14-point snag that they hit in the very first game, in the first quarter of that game against the Aces? And if their offense can hit that level to where they're scoring 20 points or more over the course of all 4 quarters, I think that's the outlet for them to contend and compete with the Las Vegas Aces, especially while the Mercury are operating without Brittany Griner. Their scoring has to be at a certain level. And I think it's going to be tough sledding on defense because you don't have a direct matchup for A'ja Wilson. Most teams don't. But specifically when you're without Brittany Griner, it makes that even more of an uphill battle than it is for most teams. So I think they're going to come up just short, but I think they're going to show even more of a competitive feel in this this second go at it against the Aces. What about you? What you thinking about for tomorrow's game?
I personally think that the Aces are not going to let the Mercury get off a single 3-point shot for at least the first half of the game. I mean, like, I really don't foresee a whole lot of threes going in tomorrow for the Mercury. If I just had to say that they must bring a different game plan, I personally believe Kahleah Copper went to the line 16 times against the Atlanta Dream. If she can match or do better, or if Diana takes some of those drives or Natasha Cloud takes some of those drives and they in turn go to the line a few more times than they did on Saturday, I think that keeps us in the game. I'm sorry, the Mercury in the game.
No, I got you. Yeah, looking at that first game, the Mercury only had 10 free throw attempts. And I think through the first quarter, they didn't have any attempts or trips to the free throw line. So when you're talking about how to make up for some of that deficit that they ultimately lost from in that first game, you can talk about schemes, you can talk about all of that stuff. If they get to the free throw line more and they can neutralize how many times the aces will be at the free throw line, that's one way to do it. I don't think they'll see as much success as they saw from the three-point line as they did in that first game either. I think they'll get up more attempts because that's where Nate wants them to be in process. They just might not make as many. So how do you make up for that 10 to 15 points that you got from the three-point line in that first game that you might not see in the second? One way is from the free throw line, and then the other way is from them getting out in transition a little bit more. I think that's another place where Nate is going to hope for his team to be operating in with great consistency. Can't get in transition if you don't stack together stops in a sustained manner. I think that's something they can do. Obviously, the 2-3 zone was big in that first game, and it was an element of surprise that came with the aces and shock value that they were able to kind of inch their way back into the game after that low first quarter. They won't have that element of surprise like I spoke to. So it's just about executing better within that, anticipating them trying to get to having somebody get a catch in the middle of the paint like they did in the second half of that game and trying to play off of that, taking that away, and then being a little bit more experimental with the matchups and everything that Nate did in that first game. Talked about Natasha guarding Tina Charles. Might we see Natasha on A'ja Wilson for maybe a couple of possessions just to make things a switch and just give her a different type of matchup to look at? Natasha can get underneath A'ja. She's stronger than she looks, and especially in trying to hold her on in the post for at least one dribble. That should allow for time for somebody else to send help from somewhere. Or also, Natasha's led the league in steals before. He's also an all-NBA, all-WNBA caliber defender every single season. That might just be enough to just dislodge the ball and break up the rhythm of A'ja. Again, just to get her something different to look at, and not it always being her going up against Natasha. So I think there's a lot of little things that they can do in their process to kind of make things a little bit different, but I'm curious to see how it goes for sure.
Yeah. Do you know if Chelsea Gray is back for the Aces? She's not.
There's I think she spoke after their most recent game, I think on Saturday, and she said she's operating with no timetable at the moment. So more than likely not gonna be around anytime soon. Might be on a similar timeline to Brittany Griner, might be longer. We just don't know, but I don't think she'll be back for this upcoming game against the Mercury.
Well, at least we don't have to worry about them dime passes, but there's still a ton left to worry about.
No, exactly. There's definitely still plenty more to worry about, but that would add a whole lot more to the plate.
Yeah. Couple of housekeeping announcements this week. First and foremost, we will not be having a Thursday show this week, but we are going to have a show on Wednesday instead. So we'll be back in 48 short hours to review this wonderful game that we're talking about right now with the Mercury and the Aces. Steven, I want you to tell the people where to find your YouTube videos, your Twitter, all the videos that you posted today.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at StayTrueS.3, STAYTrueSDOT, and then the number 3. Or you can find me on YouTube at Steven, my first name, Pridgeon, Pridgeon, Gardner, Garner, and the number 3. Like I said, that the Kahleah Copper film session we spoke to, that's on my YouTube page as well as on my Twitter. So if you want to find my YouTube through my Twitter, that's very easy. You can just kind of find that tweet and it'll be there. And then, yeah, that's pretty much where all of my stuff is being posted. I'll definitely have some more Mercury words coming by the end of this week going into the holiday weekend. So you can find that on the GoPHNX site. And, yeah, a lot of things coming as this team starts to build a little bit more film to look at and just general games under their belt.
Couple things for me. I do live in Tucson, so I do drive up to Phoenix every week for these games. That being said, I'm going to start doing a much better and quicker job of getting the videos from the post-game pressers up on the Twitter account as fast as possible. So if you see someone hanging out in the streets of Phoenix in the middle of the night, know it's just me posting the Mercury content before I drive home. That being said, you can follow me on Twitter at Erica Lee Day, ErikaLeaDay. You can follow the PHNX Mercury Twitter account. I do post a lot over there. There's some good videos from this weekend. It was a fun time up in Phoenix, Ring of Honor ceremony. Just overall blast. But again, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to PHNX Sports, go to gophnx.com. Don't forget to become a diehard. You can talk to me in the chat all the time. It's a super fun time in the Discord. If you're not there, you are missing out. We even may or may not have had a fantasy WNBA league start this weekend, and you guys all missed out. So that being said, I hope you guys have a great rest of your Monday, a happy Tuesday. Go Mercury, and we will see you guys on Wednesday.
We all silly like the mayor.